Now we'd like to present Putting a Responsible AI into Practice, which will be a panel led by Ricardo Baeza-Yates. He's our Director of Research at the Institute for Experiential AI, and Ricardo will introduce the esteemed panelists as we welcome them up to the stage. Ricardo?
Thank you. So I have the pleasure and the honor to moderate this panel. So we have first John Havens of the IEEE Standard Association. I will call them in order to in the stage. Second, Xuning Mike Tang from Verizon, that is in charge of Responsibly AI. Mike. Cansu Canca, our Director of Responsible AI Practice. And finally, Philip Brey, Professor at the University of Twente, Professor of Philosophy. So we have the philosophers on the right. Okay. I guess the computer science on the left, although John is many things. So I will go directly to the questions because we don't have much time. And the first one is for John. So IEEE was the first organization that really addressed AI ethics and an AI framework. What were the driving forces on that to get to that point?
I think there was a recognition that technology doesn't live in isolation, that when one holds up an iPhone or looks at an algorithm, it doesn't just burst into being from nothingness. There's economics that create it. There's people that create it. They create it in regions in certain contexts. And we have the benefit of being a global organization with members in over 160 countries. And Peter was saying this beautifully earlier. I often use these 5 questions, as IEEE does. Who's not in the room? And if you know from what country or indigenous folks, marginalized folks are in the room at the beginning, then you do better design. It's more responsible, it's more business worthy, and frankly, it just mirrors the human condition. So I think basically we just recognized, and I can't speak for all of IEEE, it's a pretty big organization, but there is this opportunity. I wrote a book called Artificial Intelligence, Embracing Our Humanity to Maximize Machines. And like in that book, so many great thinkers and folks that we brought into the process, this is the question I ask in the book: how will machines know what we value if we don't know ourselves? Answering that question on a regular basis is how we started the work.
Great. So one thing that Peter mentioned too was this need for multidisciplinary teams. But it's not easy to do that. So this question is for all of you. How we make that real? Maybe Mike can start, like how you do that in Verizon, how you put multiple disciplines in the room.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have both the top-down and the bottom-up approach. The top-down means that we need to have a good AI governance framework where we will be able to bring the right people to the table. Data scientists, AI researchers for sure, but we will also want to have, say, the architecture or technology consideration, where the people from the engineering team, they can help us to industrialize that, scale up. And also we need to have people from, say, legal, piracy, CISO, so that we will be able to get aligned, and then that's everything starts. But we also need to have the bottom-up approach, meaning that we need to build the community of practice. I think Cansu introduced me to this great idea of having AI ambassadors in the company. They could be the first responder to issues, and they will be the one that facilitate this collaboration. All we need to do is to enhance their awareness, enable them. I think that will be the way to bring people together and more efficiently innovate.
Cansu?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I am a big advocate of is division of labor and bringing the expertise, the relevant expertise. So sometimes this conversation about multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary gets into such a state where we all know a little bit about everything and nothing, like we don't know in depth anything. So I think it's very important that I am interested in AI. I know quite a lot about AI, but I would never call myself an AI scientist, of course. But I know that I need to have the language to be able to communicate with the AI scientists. I need to have the language to communicate with the user interface designers, the legal policymakers. And similarly, I want to have this in the team as well. So the team has to have all of these multidisciplinary experts who can communicate with each other, but who really bring in their own expertise. So you have the ethics expertise, you have the legal, you have the design, you have social sciences, which is very different in their methodology than, for example, ethics methodologies, to work together and understand each other. I think only then we have the necessary elements in the room.
Philip?
Yeah, that's very important for academic collaboration and also collaboration within companies. I would want to add to that it's not just about multidisciplinarity, it's about having a multi-stakeholder approach where people from diverse organizations and diverse backgrounds come together. Ideally, responsible AI is the product of companies, universities, governments, civil society organizations, all these together collaborating around that shared single goal.
I guess something I have learned from working with several disciplines in responsible AI is that many times we have to say, I don't know the answer to that question. I can give you my personal opinion, but I know the expert that can answer you. And sometimes it's very hard to say, I don't know, but we need to do it more. So yesterday we had a workshop, amazing workshop on responsible AI, and we discussed the key elements of a responsible AI framework. So what are the key elements for deploying a responsible AI framework for all the industry people here? John?
So IEEE, and please feel free to talk to me at lunch. We have a big document called Ethically Aligned Design. It had 3 versions, created by 700 people over 3 years. It's been used by the OECD, IBM, dozens of companies. It's free, it's open source, it's 250 pages. It has to be. When people are like, that's long, I'm like, sorry about describing technology and modernity. We have papers, the chairs are both from IBM, about how, it's called Ethically Aligned Design for Business, how to put business, this panel exactly, how to think about AI with AI ambassadors in a company. And then we just created a new one, which I wanted to talk about in terms of what I said yesterday. The number one priority for all AI in policy and design is to prioritize ecological flourishing and human well-being first. This was the list of principles we came with. Human rights is number 1. If you design technology and then say at the end, what about human rights? You've inadvertently, not necessarily intentionally, but now more and more, we cannot say it's without ignorance. It's irresponsible to build the technology and then say, what about the planet and people? Mainly in the sense of you're going to miss so many things like, for instance, the water usage of LLMs, or I know we don't have time, I have to keep my answer short, but I just went on Anthropic because Peter made a great point about Anthropic, and I asked the system, why do you use the pronoun I in your responses? And the response came back, I'm sorry that I'm using the response I in my responses. And that's not the intention. I'm going to write the Anthropic people because they seem like they're doing great work, but say it causes harm when you, in the world of effective computing, there's a lot of mental health studies, when you think you're talking to an agent that may not be human. And so all that means is disclosure at the front end. But when you prioritize it at the beginning, the Earth, and we haven't really talked about the intelligence of the Earth yet, or bringing in the Earth into our conversations. Last thing I'll say, if this is my last answer, one of the greatest thinkers in this space I can't recommend highly enough that you read is Pope Francis. Laudate Si in 2015, and now Laudate Deum from a couple weeks ago. He describes the sense of what he calls our common home, why we have to consider nature as part of us, not a separate entity to be extracted from. Again, another prioritization of why we put the planet and people first.
That's a great answer. I just mentioned something that I also don't like is that we always say the animals. We are animals too. Why we are splitting us? So, Mike.
Yeah, I think for that question, at Verizon we included our AI principles into our 2022 ESG report. So, but like policy, like principles without like company policy and standards and guidelines to back it up is like a paper tiger. So we realized that, and then we also creating our own way to measure maturity, because we definitely see that today. Like there are different organizations like NIST, they come up with the AI risk management framework, and also White House has their blueprint of AI Bill of Rights. They kind of define the high level, what the high level goals means. However, we see what is lacking is how do we measure yourself, assess yourself in terms of the maturity of your AI governance program. So only if you can measure yourself, then you know how far you away from that target and whether you are moving in the right direction. So those are the best practice, the standards, the policy that we are putting together. And of course, we don't need to forget about we cannot forget about the process, how we can operationalize that, and also with scale. That's very important for Verizon. That is because we have a lot of data team, AI team. So how to make sure that we can scale up, and the AI team, like the responsible AI team, doesn't become the bottleneck. I think that's a very important question we are trying to address right now.
Cansu?
I mean, that was the big question of the workshop, right? Like, so it's hard to say, and here is the answer, because like we worked on this yesterday all day with the experts. But I think, so I'll pick up some of the topics that are mentioned. So principles, for example. Principles was one of the, somehow when the AI ethics got the spotlight, principles became very important, and everybody started publishing their own set of principles. And what we did was to look at the whole, around the world, what are those sets of principles and how do they really compare, what do they say, and are they consistent and coherent, conceptually coherent. Why is this important? For the exact reasons why Mike mentioned, because we want to put the principles in action. So one of the things that we try to do, and which we are using in our practice, is really structure the principles in such a way that they make sense. So for example, we want to make sure that we don't just say fairness as a principle. Fairness is a concept that holds multiple different aspects within itself. So we cannot just say fairness versus privacy. That is not comparing the same type of things. Or human rights is not a principle. It's the list of, depending on how you count, 30 principles with a title, right? So taking it out of that title and laying it out, those 30 principles, and really mapping it, how do they, what are the main concerns that they are directing towards, and more importantly, what those main concerns mean when we put them into action, when we translate them into decisions during the innovation process. And I think with that, I will leave it to Philip, because I want him to talk about ethics by design, which I learned a lot while I was involved with the project that you guys led as well.
Well, thank you. I'll try to do that. So in my mind, responsible AI has 4 core elements. One is to have to embrace the right values or principles, as you say, and many have been published indeed, but they're all quite similar in what they prioritize. Secondly, there's the multidisciplinary or multi-stakeholder approach that we already talked about. Then third, you want an orientation towards anticipation and reflection. Anticipation is very important because you have to have foresight on what these technologies could mean and could do in society, and think about misuse, think about unintended consequences, and take on a reflective attitude where you can debate these things with each other and figure out what needs to be done. And fourth is really implementing responsible practice in your organization, where you make it part of the workflow. And for organizations that develop AI technology, ethics by design is an approach that we have been working on in a European context. It's also now part of the Horizon Europe program for funding, 9 billion of funding for AI. And it's an approach where we say, let's translate these quite abstract values or principles into design requirements, and then see how they can be made part of your workflow, whether you're using Agile or V-model or whatever methodology to have a series of guidelines and instructions for how to implement these principles in a design and development process. So that's what we've been developing and advocating, and I think that could be part of making AI more responsible.
So this leads beautifully to my next question, which is, Mike, how you do it in practice? What are the biggest challenges, lessons on implementing responsible AI at Verizon?
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges in implementing responsible AI in a company of the size of Verizon. I think one of the challenges will be the awareness. We have a lot of data science teams sitting across different business functions, and then they are actually at different level of maturity in terms of building AI. They might be using different tools, they may be using, following different standards and procedures in building their models. So how can we reach out to those teams and bring them along? But not just the models that we build internally, but also think about, we also buy products that with AI embedded in those products. And when businesses are buying products, they may or may not know there are AI inside of the product that they're buying. So how to make sure that they also come along so that we will be able to do these things responsibly, right? Of course, we don't want want people to build or buy any products that at the end of the day have a negative impact on the public or our own employees or the consumers. So I think that will be one challenge that we have, is about the awareness. The second thing is about the scalability, because of the size of the company and also the number of teams of building AI. So we want to make sure that we are actually be able to scale up. And when you have a centralized responsible AI team or responsible AI program, it's very easy to become the bottleneck. In particular today, with Gen AI, you see teams that are not traditionally, they are not doing anything with AI. Now they want to use Gen AI in their solutions. So that will actually make it even worse if we don't have a way to bake the best practice into the development life cycle. And everything need to go through approval, go through the centralized team, then it will become the bottleneck for sure. So I think my biggest tips will be, at Verizon, we try not to build another compliance program for AI. That's how we think will set us up for failure. Instead of building another compliance program, we look at that as building a capability to follow best practice, to combine skills, solutions, to change behavior. So I think the example that Ashok from Intuit this morning is a great example, because they're really building a platform that all the guardrails are baked into the platform, so that even for people that they are not familiar with responsible AI, when they are using the platform, they have all the guardrails there already. So I think that's a great example for industrializing that. So I think that's how we are doing that today at Verizon as well.
So any key lessons or tips so people don't rediscover the wheel? So any key lesson, like one lesson or one tip for the people here that is starting the same path?
Yeah, I think it's very important for the, number one is you need to be transparent to all the stakeholders what you are doing. And then when you are when you're doing that, you're thinking about building something as a service. And when you're thinking that, say for example, large language model, you are building, say, a detector for hallucination. So the first day you're doing that, you're thinking about building a hallucination detection as a service. So once you build that as a service, you want to make sure that you capture first of all, when you are building that, you capture the input from different teams. But after you build that, it's more importantly to make sure it's a shared resource across all the teams, so that they don't reinvent the wheel. We continue to improve the product, and that's plugged into all the other use cases and products that other teams are actually building and or they are using. Yeah.
Can I add something to the bottleneck part? I mean, so I come from public health, so I practiced applied ethics in public health and medical ethics for a long time, and there's generally this perception of ethics as the ethicists want to slow things down. And the reason I have been very much against that, so the whole framework that we are using as well is all about integrating ethics into the whole process in as efficient and as seamlessly as possible. And coming from public health, one reason why I believe in this so much is because we've seen a lot of good research in public health. They just couldn't happen because of the ethics board approvals waiting and the resource. Like, you wait for the ethics board approval, the grant time does not align anymore. You lose opportunities for doing good work while waiting for the ethics approval. And I think the same thing goes for innovation. We do want the innovation to be beneficial. For it to be beneficial, it has to happen. So we want to make sure that not only we ethicists don't stand in the way, but we are not just there to get an approval and then we disappear. We want to be there throughout the whole time, because questions don't disappear. Throughout the whole innovation cycle, questions only change shape, and they are interesting, they are necessary, they are complex, and the ethics discussion tools, methods should run alongside with that process.
John?
I wanted to respond to the idea of ethics and slow. I'm going to respond first in music. So to the sound people, this is where I told you I'm going to play harmonica for a second. So, thanks. Any large language model or AI, teach me to play harmonica. That took me 30 years, and I played quickly, you know. When I play in blues bands, the key component to musicianship is listening. And what I'm trying to get better at, because I've been on amazing panels like these, and Mike, I'd like to talk to you about Verizon later, no pressure, is that with IEEE, is a lot of times I think through those doors, what sort of is invited into the room is the intellectual side of our humanity, which is beautiful and glorious. I used to be an actor, now I'm a musician, and sometimes I feel like, hey, ho, musician, we'll talk to you after because you're the one that's going to play at dinner, which I'm happy to do. But our faith, our consciousness, our emotion, and I'm not picking on Cansu, we're friends, but I like this term, what is wrong with being slow? I'm not going to teach you harmonica. You want to ask, I'll give you the rudiments. You're going to have to go home and learn about it and sit in weird clubs and wait for people to get you up on stage and play too loud and have people say whatever. But then you're going to understand the communion of what it means when you have that consciousness of music. And I wrote a book on understanding, you know, what is subjective or squishy, emotion, psychotherapy. You can measure these things. But I bring this up because there's joy and beauty in analyzing in yourself the things that you need to grow. And sometimes this, like, not this panel, but in general, this call of like speed and productivity and efficiency and growth, where, like I just mentioned from Francis, or where through no one's intention, water's being used from our aquifers to have these AIs be run, where if the priority, I'm not just saying this to sound like the ideological top-down guy only, I've worked with over 700 to 1,000 global experts in engineering, et cetera, their message was the first thing to do is to prioritize these things. I want to remove the stigma that ethics are the people who are slowing us down. Like, what is the question of what we want with our humanity? Is it to make sure our kids grow and flourish, whoever they are around the world, in a planet that can sustain us for generations to come, with indigenous, with the marginalized at the front end? Then let's remove the constant barrage of this GDP isolation pressure that has led us to the anthropocentric place where we are. We're bringing nature or different elements into these conversations. I oftentimes feel sort of embarrassed. I'm talking about nature. It's because we need nature to live. She's a part of us. We need music to live. It's a part of us. We need religion and faith. And that's my long answer, but I'll end there. I know those are long
nature
answers,
is a she. Okay.
I like saying she.
Okay, nice. So I will,
Yeah.
Philip, you want to say something?
I'm agreeing with John here, but I would like to emphasize that ethics is often beneficial for the success of products and services if from the outset you prioritize values that people generally embrace, like privacy, like people staying in control, like the flourishing of both users and non-users, like the environment, then products and services will meet with less resistance and will be more successful. So it's a win-win situation, and by actually not having ethics as a kind of final check where you say yes or no, but as something that you build in early by using approaches like ethics in design, it's not slowing things down, it's actually just making products better.
Cansu?
Completely agree with everything, but with the speed comments, I love your emphasis about joy, by the way. Like, that is one of the things that I really think very important, because yes, we have this like narrow focus on productivity, and you're absolutely right about we should think about the other aspects of what does it mean to create a good life, good society. But I think that the speed there is not like let's move fast and break things, but the speed is in the sense that, well, if we can have an AI system that detects sepsis fast and we can actually implement it fast, we are going to save lives. And I think I want that speed a little bit. I don't want us to take too slow. So there's a combination, I think, that we have to keep in mind. And yes, if we start with the incorporating ethics early on, then we are sort of ensuring that we are not becoming the bottleneck or the slowing down factor.
Then I will say something.
Okay, of course.
I agree, but if I'm having joy, I want it slow, so I want it to last. and with that, I would like to say that it's all generative AI is great, but it's taking away the joy of getting a white paper and thinking what will be here and the process behind that, because that's part of our humanity, and we may lose it. So how many people here can find a place without the GPS? Not too many. Okay? How many people in 10 years will be able to write a letter? I'm afraid of involution, not evolution. I'm afraid of people, not AI. So I think with that, let's thank you, the panel. Great conversation.